Welcome to the Animal Training Academy podcast show. I'm your host, Ryan Cartlidge, and I'm passionate about helping you master your animal training skills using the most positive and least intrusive approaches. Here at ATA, we understand that navigating the vast challenges you encounter in training requires a comprehensive base of knowledge and experience. It's common to face obstacles and rough patches on your journey that can leave you feeling overwhelmed and stressed. Therefore, since 2015, we've been on a mission to empower animal training geeks worldwide. We've aided thousands in developing their skills, expanding their knowledge, boosting their confidence, and maximizing their positive impact on all the animal and human learners they work with. We are excited to do the same for you. Simply visit www.atamember.com, join our vibrant community, and geek out with us. And of course, in the meantime, enjoy this free podcast episode as we explore new ways to help you supercharge your training skills, grow your knowledge, and build your confidence, so that you can craft a life that positively impacts every learner you encounter. We will start today's episode where I'll be having a conversation with one Irith Bloom. Irith helps people create choice-rich environments that helps pets live in greater harmony with humans and make the entire household happier. She is a faculty at both Fenzi Dog Sports Academy and Victoria Stillwell Dog Training Academy. She's on the board of directors of the IAABC Foundation, a member of the advisory board for Pets for Vets, chair emeritus of the education committee of the Association of Professional Dog Trainers International, and a former CCPDT board member. She also volunteers for National English Shepherd Rescue. She is a sought-after presenter, and her writing has been published many times, including in her book, Your Puppy and You, a step-by-step guide to raising a freaking awesome dog. Along with Dr. Christina Spalding, Irith co-founded and is faculty at Carefree Companion, a program that helps animal professionals work effectively with clients to improve stress, resilience, and emotional regulation in non-human animals. Through her company, The Sophisticated Dog LLC, Irith also offers online services to pet professionals worldwide. So without further ado, it's my very great pleasure to welcome her to the show today. She's patiently waiting by somewhere roughly on the other side of the planet. Irith, thank you so much for taking the time to come and hang out with me and Phoebe Dog here at Animal Training Academy.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I really appreciate the opportunity.
I'm excited to see where today's conversation goes. To get us started on today's conversation, though, let's rewind your behavioural odyssey, as we like to call it here at Animal Training Academy. Maybe you can take us back to where this odyssey started, where you first learned about positive reinforcement, about animal training, started working with dogs. Where did it all start for you?
Well, for me, it started in childhood. I was one of those kids who was obsessed with animals from minute one. I did come by it honestly. My family was a very dog-loving family. There have always been dogs in the extended family for my whole life. I grew up with the most amazing German Shepherd ever. She was beautiful and wonderful and friendly and probably very tolerant because I was quite young when I met her, and she still loved me. And I'm sure I might have been kind of difficult at the time. I just don't remember because I was young enough back then that I just don't know. When I was about 9 or 10 years old, my parents decided that I was old enough for us to have our own dog, and not just for me to be visiting family dogs and learning how to behave around other people's dogs and, be appropriate with them. And so we got a wonderful Rottweiler who was just a gem in terms of personality. He was just a wonderful, amazing animal with a great deal of natural wisdom. And my parents were busy. They both worked to support us and pay for things like our home and, my clothing and food. And so the task of training our dog fell to me because they were just too busy. And I took to it like a fish to water, as they say. I just loved it. Now, I am old enough that back in those days, everybody used choke chains, and the way that you got dogs to do things was by yanking on the leash. And fortunately, like I said, I had this gem of a dog who really did understand pretty quickly what I wanted in most cases. And looking back, because I do have pretty solid memories of that process given my age, I realized that I was actually also very loath to use things like leash pressure. And I used a lot of verbal cueing and other things. I didn't use food. That wasn't a tool that we were taught to use at the time. But I was able to make my point without using a lot of violence, shall we say. It probably also helped that I was like an 80-pound kid and the dog weighed 130 or more than that pounds. He was quite a large Rottweiler. So it wasn't like I was going to be able to yank him around very effectively anyway. In that process, I learned how to communicate with him in ways that didn't involve violence. We became completely inseparable. Most of the time, I didn't even have a leash on him anyway. Things were different back then. You could have your dog wandering around a lot more in the US in those days than you can today. And we had a really, really lovely relationship. He unfortunately died young, as many Rottweilers do. But then we got another dog another Rottweiler who I trained, and then a third one who I trained. And somewhere in there, I also got involved with the world of horses, where once again, when I look back, I realized that I used very little violence with horses. I never carried a crop. I never wore spurs. Was my riding based on negative reinforcement? Yes, unfortunately it was, because that's how you're taught to ride horses, or at least that's how you were in those days. But I see that all my life, I was always a little bit hesitant about using force to achieve results. So some years later, after I had detoured my life around in a variety of different ways, I went to university, got a degree in biology, then moved overseas, got completely away from the world of biology and animals for a little while, and then came back to the United States and wound up adopting a dog who had a lot of issues. And in trying to help him get through the anxiety and fears that he struggled with, I stumbled into positive reinforcement. This was in the early 2000s. And I was lucky enough to sort of fall in with Karen Pryor and the type of people that Karen Pryor spent time with. And pretty soon I was a certified clicker trainer, and somewhere in there, enough people had said to me, wow, you do this really well. Your dog is so well behaved. You should be a professional. And I thought, maybe that would be an interesting way to take my career. So I shifted from what I was doing at the time, which was professional Japanese to English translation, into working with people and their companion animals. And since I have history with a variety of different species over the years, I also got the opportunity to work with rabbits, with cats, with horses, with parrots. I volunteered at a couple of local animal welfare agencies to help make the animals more adoptable. And I also helped people and their pets. Through all of these experiences, I think partly because, as I said, I was sort of never really into using force anyway. That was never really who I was. I wound up being extremely committed to positive reinforcement. And very quickly, I also became obsessed with the topic of choice and how we can provide more choice to non-human animals who live in this very strange world we put them in. How do we give them more control, more choice, bolster their agency in this world that we are asking them to live in, which is not natural to them? And that's really where I've found my joy and I've found my footing, is in helping animals with that and helping human animals help their non-human animals with that. So that's kind of how I got here.
And something that you didn't share there that you shared with me, and I have a point for asking this question when we caught up last week. Was it last week? I don't know, like concept of time at the moment. I think it was last week. It was relatively
something
recently.
like that, yeah.
You shared with me you speak, what, 3-4 languages?
Yeah, I speak 3 languages fluently and about 3 others well enough to get around in the country. So my fluent languages, saying that I was a Japanese to English translator probably gave away that one of them was Japanese and the other is Hebrew. And in addition to that, meaning that I know 3 different ways to write and I can write in 3 different directions, which is actually kind of fun. It's also given me a really nice sense of how important communication is and all the things that go into communication that are outside of the words in the language themselves. And I think that sometimes that's helpful to me when I look at non-human animals who mostly are not able to communicate with us verbally. I mean, parrots are sort of an exception. And, we're trying to convey a message, and our culture and our language is something that they don't share. So I do think that it's nice sometimes to have that feeling of, whoa, I've been the learner who has no idea what people are talking about, or even what this cultural moray is that they're talking about. So I'll just add that as a note, that in addition to speaking a lot of languages, I think that's actually served me well, because it's a nice model for thinking about communication with others who don't necessarily have the same cultural and linguistic background as we do.
And that interests me. I was sharing with you when we caught up last week about work in zoological collections and working within teams and thinking about the language that's used in that team or used in teams, and how important the things we say are in terms of our training. An example I shared was whether you say you can or you can't, you're normally right, which is potentially attributed to Henry Ford, but I don't think anyone has the actual timestamp or segment of history to say that with 100% certainty. But I am personally finding language really interesting, and I see an opportunity now to discuss this with somebody who has a grasp, on multiple language, which I always admire because I only speak one. And at Animal Training Academy, we always get these people coming where English isn't their first language, and they present educational material in another language, and my mind is just blown, and I just got so much admiration and respect for that. But from my conversation with you last week, and through what the audience, the listeners of the show, just learned about you, am I remembering things correctly? Language and word choice for you are something that you think is really important, and therefore you're intentional and strategic about how you use language.
Yes, I would say that that's an accurate statement. There's a lot of elements to that. So, for example, I was just talking about this to somebody the other day. I can't remember who. I do a lot of teaching, and no, it was more recent than our conversation. Although time is very fluid, I will say these days. I know it was more recent than our conversation. Whoever it was I was talking to, I was saying that I teach, among other things, for Fenzi Dog Sports Academy. And the way I address questions from different students actually varies. As I learn more about the student, I learn how their minds work. I learn about their background. I learn about what kind of language they're comfortable with. And I will actually adjust my language to be more engaging for that person. I've even, silly as this might sound, I even change my spelling. If I know someone is from an English-speaking country that is not the United States, odds are they spell the British way. And I will actually change my spellings because I don't want the words I use to be a barrier to our communication. I want them to further our communication. And I think that this is a really good analog, if you will, to working with animals where we, as the primary verbal communicator, and as the ones who know what it is we want out of the animal, it is really our job to make things clear to the listener, who in our case is a nonverbal animal. And so I think a lot about how am I expressing myself with other humans, where the specific language choice really makes a difference. And I'll give another example of that in a moment. But I also think about it in terms of, is my communication getting through? Because in the end, language is about communication. And I think we can have strong language with non-human animals that just isn't verbal language. It's a combination of our body language and tone, which also matter in human communication, but that's a side note. Body language, tone, specific words. Perhaps we teach them grammar, because you can teach animals kinds of grammar. And as we do that, it's really important, I think, for us to remember that breakdowns in communication are almost always going to be on us, because we're trying to communicate something complex to an animal who wasn't necessarily designed to take in that level of complexity without a little bit of training and background to get them there. Now, with humans, I'm also really careful. I will avoid saying things like, your dog is fearful, when I can. And I will lean towards things like saying, I'm seeing fearful behavior in your dog. And I think that kind of language also really matters, because I don't want people to be labeling the animal. This is very Dr. Susan Friedman, what I'm about to say, for the record. So thank you, Susan. I don't want to be labeling the animal and having the person then color all of their interactions with the animal based on that label. Oh, well, he's just like that because he's aggressive. He's just like that because he's fearful. He's just like that because he's soft. People talk about a soft dog or whatever it is. And then we're not actually looking at the behavior. We're sort of assigning a personality trait almost to the animal. And that implies that it's unchangeable and that we can't do anything about it. And in most cases, we can do things to help. So if we're seeing fearful behavior, I can change behavior. But if I say the dog is fearful, then people think, oh, this is a personality. The dog will never change. He will always be afraid of everything. And I can say right now that I've seen a lot of dogs who started out with a lot of fearful behavior around a lot of different situations who get a lot less of that behavior in the future when they're given the right tools. And I wouldn't want to shut down that opportunity for them by labeling them as fearful and having people basically close their minds to the idea. So that's another place where I think language really matters.
I think it's really valuable for the listeners of the show. So to hold this thought being that instead of saying your dog is fearful, you're saying I'm seeing fearful behavior in your dog as an example. Just for you, the listener, just let's pull that part out of the conversation, put it down in front of you wherever you are, because we're going to return to it. But for now, I one reason that I wanted to bring up this whole conversation is because of a word that you chose to use when talking about your behaviour odyssey. And it's not a word choice that I hear much, I don't think. And because of my intuition about who you are, of the small contact that we've had with each other, and that this is important to you, and you've just given the listener of the show some evidence as to why I'm forming this hypothesis about who Irith is. But you chose to use the word violence in terms of how you might interact with an animal, and no, I'm not saying this to have an opinion on whether it is violence or isn't violence. What I'm bringing up is it's interesting to me because it's not how I feel I hear people describe working with animals. That word choice, especially as a host of this podcast show, I don't think I've heard many people say violence. So my question is, because words are so important to you, when you're talking about this in a space, in a context like the Animal Training Academy podcast show, where you're talking to professionals, was it an intentional use? And if so, I'm just really curious about your thoughts in terms of that specific word. You guys can't see the listeners of the show here at space right now, and I'm starting to go, oh, maybe it wasn't, but I'm interested to hear your perspective.
Yeah, so it certainly wasn't a deliberate, ooh, let's, raise the temperature or create an interesting talking point. It wasn't deliberate in that sense at all. I think one of the things that has happened to me over the years, I'm sorry, this is going to sound like a sidetrack, but
No,
if you
we love
ask,
sidetracks.
oh, good. If you ask 500 biologists and ethologists what the word aggression means, you will get 500 different answers. And I have a definition of aggression in my mind that I can share or not share. It really doesn't matter because I'm just, just a random opinion. I'm not going to be having this published in a paper. But what I've come to realize as I've gone down this sort of rabbit hole of trying to figure out what aggression is that a lot of people, when they say the word aggression, they're picturing either, or it could be both things, but they're picturing threat and they're picturing violence. And somewhere in that thought process, I came to realize that, threat is not great. It can cause a terrible amount of anxiety. Let's not sugarcoat that. Threat alone can cause a great deal of psychological damage and anxiety and all of that. But violence is where the physical harm comes in. And so I've become much more aware of when am I committing, which I hope I'm not, but when am I committing violence on an animal? When is what I'm doing so intrusive that it feels like violence for the animal? Because like everything else, violence is in the eye of the beholder, right? Some people or animals have a lower pain threshold. You don't need to hit them very hard for it to hurt. If you're doing martial arts and someone kicks you in the stomach or the face, if you're doing taekwondo, you might not consider that violence because you've agreed and you're sparring, and that's part of what you're supposed to do. So even the word violence is a little bit mushy, shall we say. It's flexible, and different people are going to see it different ways. But I've come to think of any physical force that I use that is not agreed to by the animal could be perceived as violence. And I think that's why I use the word violence in talking about the things that I did back when I first learned how to train and didn't have positive reinforcement tools. So I don't know if that helps answer that question at all. I will also add that, I've met some dogs that you could bash them around and they'll think it's great fun and great play. You use that same level of force on a different dog, and that is really shattering for them and really disturbing for them because for them it is violence. So even the word violence, like I said, is a little fluid. But I think that we often, what's the word I want? We use euphemisms. Humans use a lot of euphemisms. We like to make something sound prettier than it is. And I've started to think that force has become a little bit of a euphemism that sugarcoats the use of what often rises to the level of violence. And I think that's why I've started using the word violence. But until we had this conversation, I had never really thought about it.
Well, it ties into, I think, that little segment of the conversation we pulled out earlier and laid down in front of us. And that was the difference. And I'm gonna say the difference in the average person, as you've just beautifully highlighted with some candid examples, what one experience might be experienced as for one individual could be completely different for another. So we can say that we might label a client's dog as fearful and they might react in a certain way, but obviously the same rules apply. Some people might not care. Some people might be like, oh my God, and it might change everything about how they behave in the future. So the average person, and I have no data to back this up, I'm just hypothesizing, the average person, if you say to them, your dog is fearful versus I am seeing behaviors in your dog that I might label as fearful, we might get different behaviors out of our human learner than if depending on how we phrase it. And this reminds me of our conversation we had last week, which we probably should have just recorded it and released that because that was so interesting. But we talked about being a lifestyle behaviorist and applying what we know about behavior, and we apply to our dogs or our horses or our parrots or whatever species we're working with, to each other and to our clients and to ourselves and to our partners and to our co-workers, and just going about your life with behavior science on board, acknowledging how you are an antecedent and a consequence to the behavior of the human learners you're working with. And with our clients, we want to change their behavior, right? So putting in the phrasing of how you say that thing is an antecedent to whatever behavior follows. And we can influence that. And so violence kind of falls into this category too, right? So I'm glad I asked you, because for our audience, violence could mean, the world is your oyster. As you said, if you had 500 people, you get 500 different responses.
Exactly. And, it's interesting because now that we've had this whole discussion, I'm sort of reflecting on my own language use. I don't say violence to clients. Mm-hmm. I don't use that term because I think that could be a very triggering term. So when I'm addressing a human who has a non-human animal in their care, I think care is the word that I prefer for this, and they're looking to improve that animal's life, and I'm looking to help them improve that animal's life and improve the relationship that they have and all of those pieces. My biggest priority is getting the human on board so that they will make the types of changes that are going to support an improvement in lifestyle for everyone. And the best way to do that is by communicating in a way that engages them and does not push them away. And so, for example, if I were to say to someone, well, that was a pretty violent thing to do to your dog, odds are I would push them away. And so that would not be the word that I would choose. I will also say, especially with human animals, but I do this with non-human animals too, everything works better when you approach with curiosity. And I think that as behaviorists, even though I'm not a PhD, I'm technically not a behaviorist, I'm a behavior consultant, just to say, under the way that we use the word in the United States. As behavior scientists, maybe is the way to put this, we tend to approach the behavior we see and say, why is the behavior happening? By which we mean, what's the context? What's the function? What is triggering the behavior if it happens to be habitual and triggered by antecedents? What is reinforcing the behavior if it's goal-directed and supported by its consequences and, maintained by its consequences? And so we approach with curiosity. We don't say, wow, this dog bit someone, I guess that's that. We say, why did that happen? What was going on in the environment? What has happened in the environment in the past to support or encourage that kind of behavior? And I think that one piece that we often miss in dealing with the human animal is to approach with that same curiosity. We give this grace to the non-human animals where we say, well, the horse must have had a reason to bite, which, by the way, I guarantee you the horse had a reason to bite, and the vast majority of the time it's going to relate to pain. That's just a side note. But we'll say that. We'll approach and we'll say, what made the horse bite? And horse bites are terrible, by the way. I hope none of you ever get bitten by a horse. I have been fortunate, never have, but they're horrible. But then when the human resists us or behaves in a way that we don't approve of with the animal that's in front of them, we have this tendency to just come down with a judgment. And what we should really be doing is approaching with curiosity in that situation too. Was it something about the way I set things up for them? Was it something about the way life has set things up for them? Is there a different way that I can express what I'd like to see that will help them be more open to changing their behavior? Did they just hit their threshold today? And if I can accept a non-human animal hitting their threshold, why am I so challenged in accepting a human animal hitting their threshold? So I'm not quite sure that I meant to get here when I started this comment, but where I'll wrap it up to is I would like to see us give the same grace to human handlers that we do to the non-human animals. And I think that that will support better results in what we ultimately get for both of the animals in that situation, the non-human one and the human one. Both of their lives will improve when we approach with curiosity and we give them a little bit of grace while we figure out why things are happening and how we can help.
Couple of things. How many things? We've got one thing, two things, three things. First thing, I sucked. And then, the first step of being sort of being good at something is sucking at something. So that's okay. But I would use the label I sucked at high school English. I think I failed everything throughout the entire year and got 50% on my final exam. I didn't even read Macbeth. I watched the Mel Gibson movie, but that was enough. That was enough. And learning a few quotes and where they were in the thing. But it's funny that I've always identified, and I own this, like this is my own creation. I've identified I'm not good at English. I'm not a writer. I'm not a reader. I don't play around with words much. And that identity will lead to behaviors. And I remember when I first got started at Animal Training Academy, I have to write a little bit more now in this new role that I've created. And I would use depending on what computer and app I was using potentially and what spell check that app used, I would write behavior with a U or without a U. And people would message me and they'd be like, this is really frustrating me. Like, are you using this language? Someone even reached out and offered to like correct it all for me on my website. But that I'm bringing it up because if I've created a website and I've created a website because I want people to read the content on that website, but I'm not getting that behavior because they aren't absorbing the information. Instead, they're seeing a spelling of a word and it's tripping them up and causing them to get distracted. I mean, that comes back to what we were talking about in terms of being a lifestyle behaviorist and realizing like if you want behavior, then you've got to set the environment up for the right behavior to be more successful and to have the practice skill of changing your behavior based on your context. Wow, do you do that? That's amazing. With regards to how you spell words, I mean that's pretty cool. Then you also asked, like, why are we so challenged at seeing this with each other? And I think this is like a circles to this. Like, I always joke, and it's a joke that I'm reinforced for using, and I know that because I do that behavior at a high frequency. But it's a joke that I borrowed from. I'll give it back one day, I promise. Dr. Susan Friedman, and that is, I wish podcast Ryan or Dad Ryan could like come in and sit in on this presentation I'm giving right now or this workshop that I'm running because he could probably learn a couple of things. And I like to say that I think I'm realizing as I contemplate on my life, and maybe this narrative's not helping me, but running Animal Training Academy 40 hours a week, that I'm consciously incompetent at these things. Like I know all these things, but like I don't have the reps of a lot of the things that we talk about on this show, and it's just like humbling to acknowledge that. And then you and I talked about last week as well. This is all tying into everything you've shared and leading to a question. We talked about a project run by colleagues of ours. It's called Lima Beings. It's run by some fantastic people, including Dr. Chris Pockle, Kathy Sadeo, Lynn. What's Lynn's last name? Unga.
Yeah, I think it's Ungar. I was gonna say that and then I doubted myself. So yeah.
Yeah, I just didn't want to say it wrong. And Barry Finger. And they just had a conversation about how they really value. I mean, that's been going since COVID. So obviously there's reinforcement for them. And one of the reinforcers that they were discussing was the value of the kind of conversations they have, which is exactly what we're talking about, being a lifestyle behaviorist, applying least intrusive, minimally aversive, whatever wording you choose around this to your non-human learners, and how the lemur beings are so valuable for them. And the reason I joined is because I don't have that in my life on a regular basis. People just talking about life, but with a behaviorist lens, understanding antecedents and consequences. Like, I'm just curious on your thoughts. You asked, why is it so hard? Why is it so hard? One curiosity I have is about just opportunities to practice.
I think that's a really excellent point, opportunities to practice. And I also want to say, just to sort of, I don't know what the right phrase is for this, to relieve you of some of the guilt you might feel about not being perfect at all of these things. So
Hey, no one said I wasn't perfect.
I'm sorry. Your perfection is clear at all times.
Perfectly imperfect.
Absolutely.
Perfectly me.
So exactly. You are a perfect example of yourself, which I often say to people when they ask me, if I have a mixed breed dog, they're like, what kind of dog is that? Oh, it's a purebred Fido. Anyway, so I think that, in teaching in Carefree Companion, we were just doing a motivational interviewing class, I'm obsessed with motivational interviewing. It's super cool. Anyway, and I was modeling something. And as I modeled it, one of the students said to me, that was a yes, no question. I was like, oh, crap, that was a yes, no question, which you're not supposed to ask in motivational interviewing. And I'm pretty good at motivational interviewing. And yet I still asked a yes, no question in there. And it's an iterative process learning. You always take time and we're always developing. And when you stop learning, you're probably dead. I mean, if you're paying attention, you should be learning until the day that you stop breathing, basically. Sorry to put that in such depressing terms, but that's how I view it. So I will say, on the one hand, I think that it's hard practice. We do not have a lot of opportunities for it. And it can be difficult to be aware of these things. And then when you make the mistake, you're like, oh, I can't believe I just phrased myself that way to the client. What was I thinking? And you're sort of backpedaling and trying to figure out how to fix it. And that's fine. None of us, except for Ryan, are perfect. And, there's always going to be times when you don't do the thing perfectly and you have to go back and say, well, here's an example. This is a great learning opportunity. When I go home from this client session, let me think about what I could have said instead. Let me write out 10 options. I mean, that's how I would do it. Let me write out 10 options for how I could have said this instead. And then hopefully one of them will occur to me the next time I'm in this kind of situation. So I think that's a piece of it, is the practice. I also think there's a bigger underlying psychological tendency, though, in us as humans, where we think animals are not. We try really hard not to assign complex thinking and motivations to non-human animals. We're taught not to anthropomorphize to, this excessive extent where we're like, well, clearly the dog has plans to take over the universe and launch nuclear missiles. We're taught not to think that way. And so because of that, we're much more willing to say there must be a reason why this weird behavior is happening and why I'm not able to adjust it. But with humans, we're like, clearly they have intent. They're doing this intentionally. This is purposeful, and they want to annoy me. And I'm not saying that is true, by the way, but I'm saying that that's our bias. As humans, we look at other humans and we assume that the things they are doing are intentional and purposeful, deliberate, and not products of consequences and the antecedents that were present in the environment before the behavior happened. But in fact, humans are subject to the same behavior laws as non-human animals. I think it's just a little harder for us to step back and say, with all this amazing cortical ability that humans have, this incredible cognition that humans have, we feel like they should know better. But that's not actually how behavior works. So I think that's another piece of it. I think that it is more challenging for us as humans to say this other human might be doing their best and this really is as good as they can be, because we kind of feel like, no, they should be able to do better. And so then maybe we don't practice as hard, and so we don't get as good at being curious, and it just kind of cycles in the wrong direction.
Yeah, and a lesson I had just recently is I was that person who was like, oh my God, I can't believe I said that. I don't think I ever thought that, actually. I think I acknowledged how what I said was violent. I'm channeling what's that guy's name? Nonviolent communication guy.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I know exactly who you mean, and I do not know his name.
Well, you find it.
Yes.
And there was a lesson there for me that
Rosenberg. It's Rosenberg.
Rosenberg. Yes. And speaking of a better tennis player than myself, someone who is, for me, a consciously competent person that I can reach out to. And they explained that the behavior of this other person made complete sense. If we looked at the antecedents and consequences, and we did our best to anticipate, to hypothesize what the reinforcers were for this person and in the situation and context they found themselves in, the behaviors that we were seeing made complete sense, which allowed empathy to enter the rumination and reminded me of my conscious incompetence. And curiosity is a value of ours at Animal Training Academy. And I'm thinking back to what you said, like remove any guilt from myself. I don't feel guilt. I feel excitement more than anything, because there's an opportunity to learn here. There's an opportunity to identify patterns in myself here, and there's an opportunity to change my antecedents and to do things differently next time if I can identify what those patterns are in myself, which I have a process for doing. So it's not, I don't feel guilt. I feel empathy for myself. I feel fearful about losing clients, etc., and things like that. I acknowledge my own fears in the process. And so, last question, because I want to talk about a few other things before we officially wrap up today. We need to be going for an hour. We've been going for 40 minutes. How do you approach with curiosity then? How have you developed that skill over your lifetime? Is it something that came from the environment you were in as a child? Is it something that you've found yourself surrounded with as you've developed professionally in your career? Is it something that you've intentionally just worked on hard yourself? Like, how did you come to that conclusion that you shared with us today?
Well,
which is something I resonate with.
Right. So first of all, I just want to say, if we could all approach with curiosity and empathy, and I love that you mentioned excitement about, hey, I'm having this opportunity to learn, I think we would all be happier and better human beings. So I just want to start there. As for how I got to approaching with curiosity, it's kind of a little bit of an all of the above from what you said. There's definitely been a very conscious cultivation of that skill for me. I realized basically the day I started working with people, the day I stopped working only directly with non-human animals and started working with people who had non-human animals, I very quickly realized that I needed to cultivate that curiosity, because if I didn't understand where they were coming from, I would not be able to help them achieve the goals that they had and the goals that I was hoping we could also achieve for the sake of the animal in their care. So there's definitely been a very deliberate process, which mostly involves stepping back, taking a breath, saying, there's a reason for this. Let's start figuring out what the reason is. And then this goes into, like I said, motivational interviewing, my big obsession, which is what question can I ask to understand their motivations better? And the quick tips that I can give are ask open questions and then listen. Don't think about what you're going to say in response, just listen. So you say something like, I'm hearing that you were really frustrated when Fido barked and lunged at the other dog. Tell me a little more about that. And you're going to find out all kinds of things. Maybe their Aunt Martha yelled at them once when their childhood dog barked and lunged at someone. And so it's supercharged for them, or something else. Whatever it is, when you ask those open-ended questions, people will give you information, and then you pull a nugget out of that and ask your next open-ended question. And at some point, as a professional, at some point, you're actually going to give them advice. You don't ask them open-ended questions forever. But now you can give advice that has that understanding behind it, that is tailored to suit what they've told you. I want to avoid being embarrassed like I was when Aunt Martha yelled at me. And so now you're going to tailor your solutions to help reduce their embarrassment, as well as to help the dog feel better in the situation or whatever it is that's going on. So that's one piece, is this sort of professionally thinking about it piece. Another big piece of it, to be blunt, I grew up in 2 different countries. I went back and forth a lot. I had an accent everywhere. I was culturally ignorant, and I use the word ignorant meaning lacking in knowledge, everywhere, because if I spent 2 years in this country, I missed 2 years of cultural knowledge in the other country, and then I would go back and forth, and I would just, everywhere I went, I was always like, wait, what are you people talking about? There's this TV show or this sports event or something that wasn't relevant in the other country I lived in, and so I never heard about it. I lived in Japan when the O.J. Simpson trial, which was huge news in the United States, happened. I didn't even know about it, basically, until I came back to the United States. And then everyone's talking about O.J. Simpson, and I'm like, wait, the football player? I mean, and sorry, by the way, that's American football, which is not real football. I get it. Especially now in the middle of the World Cup, which is real football. So part of it for me has been that I was that misunderstood human a lot of the time, where people were judging me and saying, she talks funny, she doesn't know this, that, or the other. And I was getting teased. I was what today would be called bullied, and what at the time I called teased as a child. And I think that set me up. I'm fortunate, I guess, that set me up to have a lot of empathy for people not necessarily having all the tools through no fault of their own, and then being judged when they don't actually have the tools for the scenario. So I think that also helped me be curious. I sort of walked in with more empathy inherently because I had been in those shoes in a certain sense. Obviously, my experience is not identical to anyone else's experience, and everyone's experience is unique. But having been in the position of being an outsider, and like when I lived in Japan, I was a visible minority, which I'm not in the United States. And I'm not saying I've had anything like the experience of visible minorities here in the United States, but I have a little more empathy for what it might be like for them, and a little bit more curiosity about what their exact experiences are, because I have been subject to that experience. So I think it can help if we hook into the times when we feel like someone didn't understand us, or we didn't have all the tools we needed, and we were beginners, and we couldn't figure out how to hold the lead line and the clicker and all the things at the same time. Then we have that empathy, which I think helps cultivate the curiosity, and the curiosity then cultivates empathy, and it becomes this really lovely loop. So I think that's also been part of what's brought me to this point. And that brings me back to the being a polyglot, someone who speaks a lot of languages. That is also a piece of this, because there are words I can say in one of my languages that literally don't exist in my other 2 languages. In each of the 3 languages I speak, there are words like that. So learning that there are times when it's really hard to communicate your message, even though you understand your message very well, also gives me more empathy and more curiosity. How can I help this person convey the idea for me when it's clearly difficult for them to express it? All of that plays into it. But honestly, functionally, as a behavior consultant, it's really about the practice. That's what's brought me the furthest along, is just practicing over and over and over again.
And if you, the listener, have enjoyed this episode, we're going to follow this one with another one with Irith and also be joined by past ATA podcast guest and a current partner in crime to you, Irith, and that is the wonderful Dr. Christina Spalding, where we will be exploring a relatively new project called
Yes.
Carefree Companion. This is my understanding of it. You can correct me if I'm wrong. It's an 8-month mentorship and certification program that teaches behavior professionals how to effectively coach human clients, which is one thing that we've been talking about today, to support emotional regulation and resilience in animals with complex cases. So you're helping coach the human clients who are dealing with complex cases. And it focuses on bridging the gap between technical training plans and the human owner's ability to successfully implement them. Have I got that right?
Yes. Yes. It essentially, what we do at Carefree Companion is we coach the people. I mean, we don't coach, we teach the people who coach the people who have the companion animal. So our goal is to help you as a professional trainer, behavior consultant, become better at getting great results for clients by helping those clients understand what they're doing better, by helping those clients have the tools to support animals who maybe need a little help learning about emotional regulation and stress coping. And we love it. It's a super fun program. I mean, it's super fun for us. We learn so much from our students.
Was today's episode a bit of a teaser of some of the kinds of things people might learn? It was not intentional, but I think
no, not intentionally. Certainly not. I mean, like that we didn't. You and I did not set up in advance to make it sort of about this, but because we did talk a lot about the human relationship part of it. Yes, some of the skills I've been talking about are things that we really focus in on. Our biggest goal is to help people, to help professionals be more effective coaches of the people in this human, non-human animal relationship that we are trying to support.
Well, it sounds amazing. We're going to talk in depth about the program in the next episode and be joined by Dr. Christine Spalding. So if that's something that interests you as the listener of this show, then make sure you follow up this episode with the next one in our lineup. Nearly at the end, we do ask this question of all of our guests, though. We've been asking it now for 10 years. This show's 10 and a half years old. So it's very cool that when we say,
good for you.
Can you tell us what you want to see happen in the next 5 to 10 years? We can look back literally 10 years ago and see what people were saying back in 2016. But in your words, I'm curious to hear what you feel we as an industry where we're heading or where you would like to see us land over the next 5 to 10 years.
In the next 5 to 10 years, I would love to see everyone routinely looking for both assent and consent in the non-human animals in their care, where it's not just, oh, I'm going to trim your nails, so I'm going to ask you yes and no, but it's, I want to pet you, I'm going to ask you yes and no. It's, I'd like to take you for a walk now. Would you like to go this direction, that direction? I want that to be routine, where people think that is normal. That's what I would like to see 5 to 10 years from now.
Amazing. And I had written down here to talk to you about your air quotes obsessions at the moment. I think it was your word, choice, control, and agency. But the conversation took a different direction, so we didn't manage to get there today. But if you, the listener, want to learn more about those super important things, you can look back in our back catalogue. We have some great episodes. We have one with Dr. Erin Jones on, what's the title of her book? Oh, I just had it on my screen. Constructing Canine Consent.
Yes, she has a great book on that. by the way. I just have to say, she's fantastic,
Yeah.
and she has a great book on that.
And if you're interested in learning more about the book, the podcast is a great place to dive into introduction to that concept and ideas that the book will unpack in much more detail. And then an episode of Hannah McGee, if you look that up in our podcast lineup, and the work that she did on her in her academic journey under Dr. Jesus Rosales Ruiz on Ascent with her rats and talking about that. So yeah, agree, super important topics. And we didn't cover them today, so we've got you covered though in our podcast lineup. Before we officially end the episode for today, can you just let the listeners know where they can go online to say hello and to find your resources?
Yes, absolutely. So the best place to start, although it's in the middle of a website revamp, so we'll see where we are in the revamp when you get there, is my website, which is thesophisticatedDog.com. I know that's a lot of letters. I apologize. You can also find me, of course, in my partnership with the amazing Dr. Christina Spalding at carefreecompanion.com. If you're looking to take coursework with me, you can find me through Victoria Stilwell Academy, or I teach classes very regularly for Fenzi Dog Sports Academy. I'm listed in faculty, so you can just find me. It's not a simple URL like Fenzi Dog Sports Academy /Irith Bloom, but there's some like numbers in there. But that's always a really good place to find me. And there's a contact form on my website. If you actually want to have a direct email chat with me, start with the contact form, and I will get back to you usually within about 3 days.
Amazing. And we will, of course, link to all of this in the notes pertaining to this podcast episode. Irith, this has been, I feel like I butchered your name at some point through the episode today, so I apologize for my brain forgetting to slow down and pronounce that correctly. But on behalf of myself and everyone listening, we really appreciate you taking the time to come and hang out with us today. Thank you so much.
Well, it has been a great honor and a pleasure both being here and speaking with you, Ryan. So thank you so much to you also.
And thank you so much for listening as well. This is your host, Ryan Cartlidge, signing off from this episode of the Animal Training Academy podcast show. We hope today's conversation inspired you and equipped you with new tools for your trainer's toolbox. Remember, every challenge in training is an opportunity to learn and sharpen your animal training geekery. Embrace the rough patches, learn from them, and keep improving. And don't forget, the path to growing your skills and expanding your knowledge continues beyond this episode. Visit www.atamember.com to join our supportive membership, where you will find a community of trainers just like you. Together, we're making a huge positive difference in the lives of animal and human learners worldwide. Until next time, keep honing your skills, stay awesome, and remember, every interaction with an animal or human learner is your opportunity to create ripples. We're here, cheering you on every step of the way. See you at the next episode.